Now we're going to talk about top 3 dynamic pricing strategy to manage and control revenue. A lot to learn. So please welcome Maria from Beyond.
Does it work? Okay, so my mission is to keep you guys awake. And revenue management is not a dry topic at all, obviously. So we start with a show of hands to make sure that your guys not sleeping. So first of all, who had a great summer? Awesome. Okay. Who thinks you left money on the table? No. Okay, this one. Who thinks maybe your team worked a little bit too much? No? Good. Who thinks you're going to have interesting times in the next few months? Okay, good. Maybe yes, maybe not. We'll see. Right, so this was the brief. So our partners at Avantio asked us to focus on 3 things. The first one was strategies for dynamic pricing, which is kind of like what we do, also 3 mistakes to avoid, and whether reservation management and revenue management were the same thing. We absolutely loved the questions, and we're going to address each of them. We're just going to do it up. ¿Este de aquí? No? Okay. Okay. Right, left hand then. We're just going to do it in the opposite order. So, reservation management, is it the same as revenue management? Who thinks it is? Who thinks it isn't? You don't know? Okay. Right. So we wanted to kind of like, make you guys think about this instead of giving you all of the answers. So pick one of these options, and we'll give you 3. The top one is if you could make 100,000 euros with your portfolio, but it was kind of like a 1.5 days average length of stay. Or on the other extreme, if you could make 60K, but it was much longer stays, or somewhere in the middle, where would you guys fall? So who would go for number 1? No one. Okay. Number 2. Oh, well, there's one. There's one number 1. Okay. Number 2. Okay. True. And number 3. Good. And I think that starts answering our question. The next one is, assuming you have a revenue management team, how do you incentivize them? Do you incentivize them on revenue? Anyone? No? With incentive, I mean, do you give them a commission or some bonus or something if they do well? No? Good. Do you incentivize them on profit instead of revenue? No. Do you not incentivize your teams? Okay. I see a pattern. And do you not know what revenue management is? Okay, there's a baseline. So, look, the takeaways here is, I think most of you chose to make less money if you can have more manageable reservations. And that is definitely a trend. Reservation management includes a consideration around costs and operational issues that revenue traditionally hasn't. And I do think personally that most of the tools that are optimizing your revenue today will need to start optimizing your profit as well. Because we've all heard about inflation. I was a couple weeks back in Porto, and definitely costs was the main theme, well above revenue. So we've established that they're not the same thing. Now on to the mistakes. We're lucky enough to work with hundreds of property managers, and we look at around 500 million listings every single day, and we change the pricing for each of those. So we've seen probably everything under the sun, because those are no 2 property managers, frankly, are the same. But there's kind of like, 3 broad categories that we see people fall into. And it's a pendulum, really. So the first one is no tech. You guys have come here to listen to a technology company, so probably you are interested in tech. And even our clients, you would argue that they are, because they hire us. But it is very, very tempting, especially when times get hard, to just trust your gut and trust your intuition. And we do see clients that struggle to really trust an algorithm, and the ramp to a place where they're using technology in the right way is very, very, very long. So that's one side of the pendulum, is to not trust that an algorithm can be better than what you know, which is a very, very human reaction. The second one is to use only tech. And we do have also clients, unfortunately, that fall into this category, or lots of people that we talk to. These are clients that, since they've hired a tool, they're just expecting that the tool will do everything for them, and they can just run in autopilot. I'm going to show you a bit later why you cannot do that. But the true combination that you need to look for is the right combination between people and tech. You cannot let the tech on autopilot, you cannot let the humans on autopilot, but together they should work well. And then the final one, which, well, with a couple of years that we've had in the industry, has been quite common too, is what we call the panic override. So even the most seasoned property managers, they have hired the right tools, they have a great tech stack, they have a good team with a lot of experience, and then they suddenly see that occupancy is going low. What do? They drop all the prices. They don't trust the tool, they don't trust the team, they don't trust anything. They go into panic override. Now, it's easy to say that this is a mistake because we're all human and emotions play. And anxiety is a very interesting emotion, especially in this industry. But that is one thing that we always recommend against. Keep cool. So let me show you some data, because that's what we do, to try to explain a little bit more this concept. So what you can see here is a map of the daily ADRs, so kind of like the daily rates, the average daily rates in EMEA. So kind of like Europe, Middle East, and Africa in 2022 and 2021. So first, the good news, it's been a great year, people. ADRs are up and occupancy has gone up, so everyone has had a brilliant summer, and obviously an even more brilliant Q1. But if through a human you're trying to predict this, it's just impossible. You could never know that. I think, somewhere, it was the 18th of September, you had a 15% drop year on year on ADR, and that was the right level to maximize your revenue per available night. And you could also not know that somewhere in April, it was 70% plus, right? And I think there was another date that it was kind of like 180% plus. That's what technology can do for you. If you don't use technology, you will miss out on all of these things. You will leave money on the table, or you will make mistakes. But at the same time, you see that it changes very rapidly. If you leave the technology on autopilot, you will not know how you need to be adjusting the prices for your properties. So we have a concept called base price, which incorporates the nuances of your properties, and that's kind of like the seed into any algorithm. And that seed is very important because it will talk to the nuances of your property. If you have a high-end property, or your property has a pool, or it has new aircon, or whatever it is, that all feeds into what your kind of like center base should be. And then the tool will do itself to make sure that it goes up and down, and it finds the right price at the right moment for the right user. But without that base price, the algorithm is a little bit blind. And as market changes, as your property change, as your relationships with your owners or your business models change, you need to make sure that you keep adjusting that. So again, leaving the tool on autopilot will help you, but you'll still leave money on the table. And then the final one, the panic override. It's been hard in some markets. So what you can see here is 4 of other main markets for us and for Europe. And this is kind of like on the horizontal axis, you can see the percentage of properties that included last-minute discounts this summer. So what you can see here is that some people have had a pretty thrilling summer in the negative way of things, right? So if you're a property manager in Logroño, I think in Cannes, and pretty much anywhere in the United Kingdom, you've had to adjust your prices quite a bit, and you've had to make use of lots of that last-minute discounts because booking times have been extremely depressed in many of these places. Not everywhere. Portugal had a fairly stable summer. But when this happens, it is very normal to just drop all of your prices. And we've seen a lot of that behavior, right? All of those manual overrides. That mean you leave money on the table, but that's what you have to do, I guess, to keep sane. So as takeaways, rely on technology. Algorithms are a beautiful thing. They can process a lot more data than we can, and they can give you time back. They can make you more money. The second thing is don't leave them on autopilot. So find the right combination of revenue management experts and tools. And if you don't have revenue management experts, you may be able to outsource that to your tool provider, but do that. make sure that you have that good combination. And of course, keep calm and carry on. So onto the strategies. I've spoken a lot about pricing because dynamic pricing is kind of like what we're known for, but we did want to give you a few tips on other themes that are very, very hot for our clients. Before I do that, I did want to set some context just so that you guys see what we're seeing and what's coming. So this is looking at Q4. We also have data for 2023 and beyond, but we felt that kind of like the next 3 months are going to be quite important because things are changing. The good news is in EMEA, we're seeing that daily rates compared to last year. So, very important thing. We made a typo here. Pink is actually this year, not pink or turquoise or whatever it is. That's actually last year. So pink this year is over last year. That's good news. But that is across the entire region. Every market is actually looking very, very different. In terms of occupancy, so this is not occupancy that we are forecasting, because then we would all be in trouble. This is just, the amount of bookings that are already in the system for our property managers. And what you see there again is kind of like the comparison of 21 and 22. It tends to be, this shape is definitely not unusual. People tend to book, a little bit later in the year, and this graph, I think, was made about 2 weeks ago. So what's very comforting in this graph is that occupancy this year and occupancy last year are quite leveled. So higher prices, same occupancy, that's good news. Again, that's across the region. If you look at Spain, we sort of pick in one market, and we picked Spain because we're in Valencia at the moment. But you can also see, some fluctuation, perhaps not as rosy as in other parts of the region, but relatively consistent. And the same happened with occupancy. In fact, occupancy should be a little bit better this year than last year. So from a pricing standpoint, we are seeing stability that I think is perhaps not what everyone expected, given inflation and all of the looming recession news. But there's definitely change coming. That change is going to be very different for each of you, even if you're all in Spain or you're all in Portugal or you're all in France. Occupancy and demand is relatively stable. That's really good news because that calls for pricing adjustments. There's a lot of optimization that you can do over the next 3 months. And the takeaway, stay close and responsive. Leverage last-minute discounts if you have to, but do not panic. Things are not looking that bad. Now, pricing aside, as I said, there's these other areas that come up all the time and that we work with our partners with. The first one I wanted to talk about was channel optimization. So this is just, what we see through our platform in terms of the percentage of the bookings that go through a particular channel. So obviously, Booking, Airbnb, and Vrbo have kind of kept relatively steady, but with a nice growth this year. Direct bookings are still not kind of quite getting their hold over here or as much in the US. And then there's a lot of other OTAs in this region. Now, why did I present that? Well, it is important that you look at this, right? One of the main topics that we speak to our clients about is also, channel optimization. Have a look at what's out there and see if you need to adjust any of your pricing strategies for that. Make sure that your PMS has this information. Without this information, it's very difficult to know where your clients are coming from. And also, if you have a strategy to move more into direct bookings, how on earth are you going to do that? Test channel markups. Again, you can play a little bit with your pricing there, especially if a channel has, more of a weight in your portfolio. It's definitely a fertile ground to do more testing and have a seasonal channel plan, right? Again, not every channel is as popular in every season because the audiences change through the seasons. So revenue management is not just pricing, it's a bunch of other things, and managing your channels well is crucial. The second one is supply growth. So who has experimented more competition in the last 12 months? No one? Well, there's definitely a lot more supply out there. The good news is there's definitely a lot more demand too. So that's quite stable. We're not yet in a position where supply outweighs demand. But it does mean that you just need to be smarter than maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So keep your enemies close. Make sure that you have data. If your pricing tool, if you use a pricing tool, has comp sets, that's honestly a godsend for many property managers. Try to understand, kind of like any upcoming supply on the ground. Use your data if you can to grab it, if you want it. But also set owner expectations. When competition increases, You need to understand what their supply growth is versus that demand growth, to be honest, to be able to manage the expectations. Otherwise, you could lose supply. And if you lose supply, that impacts revenue a lot more than dynamic pricing. So this is definitely a very big topic and something that property managers have a lot in mind lately. Through our platform, we have a tool called Insights, and monitoring competition has become increasingly popular. And then the final one, we love our owners, is owner communications. That's something that even ourselves, we do work with owners directly, but mostly with property managers. But we put in a lot of emphasis behind, because speaking to owners is an acquired skill. So who has owners that are very different from each other? Probably all of you, right? So you have some owners that are just investors and they just care about ROI. Yep, we have many of those. Do you have some owners that would absolutely freak out if you move one ashtray from the table into a slightly different position? Yeah, we have those too. So segmenting your owners and being able to communicate to them in different ways is important. Now, why is that important beyond keeping them? When it comes to revenue and more advanced strategies like dynamic pricing, you will see some owners that are extremely reluctant to that, right? Some of them will think that you're going to scam the users, or that you're going to overprice, that is going to drive reviews down, and so on and so on. Or they may just not even understand how it's even possible, or they may not value your expertise beyond the tool. So making sure that you use the data that you have from these tools to be able to explain them in very different ways, depending on the profile, why the market is moving, and everyone needs to stay ahead of that, including yourselves as value providers to them, and including themselves as owners, is very, very important. So showcase your strategy, make sure that you defend with data, and hopefully use that data to acquire new owners. And that's it from us. Thank you very much.
All right, so we can open some Q&As now. Does anyone here has any questions to Maria?
I can't see.
I have.
Go for it.
Maria, I have a question here. Is about, of course, everyone here is looking for guest loyalty, right? So you might have a guest that's coming every year to your apartment, but that year, suddenly your price raises a lot because that's what the market is demanding. How do you explain this to your guest?
Yeah, we never ever get that question. Well, I think you have different choices there, right? First of all, we would never ask a property manager to not have a specific strategy, depending on those segments, and if they have those kind of like repeat users, there's a way to educate them on how the market has moved on. But ideally, you always need to keep a sustained level of value for money. So those are some of those cases where maybe you try to kind of like maintain certain margins for your prices for the algorithm, if you think that that's the right strategy for you. But in general, there's education that needs to happen, right? When the supply was much higher than the demand, the conditions are done, and when there's a lot more demand, then everything increases. So there's lots of tools that you can have on the platform and many other platforms to help you have those conversations. But at the same time, you should always remain in control, because ultimately it's your business.
Wonderful. I just have another one. Okay. So what are the 3 main mistakes that a property manager makes when start working with a revenue management tool?
I would say maybe, to be honest, it's consistent with the themes that I've spoken about. But the first one, what I would say is some of them just want to do 1 or 2 properties and then never spend enough time to learn the tool and then what the tool can do, and then it becomes an afterthought. That is quite common, to get kind of like, excited, and then you get into that level of what I said, right? That fear of of the algorithm. I think if you're going to try something, you need to give it a trial. That's number one. Number two is the opposite, right? You know, they may sign a contract and then disappear, and just expect that everything is going to happen. And many times when we're reviewing their portfolio, we're doing a booking review and we have recommendations. It is very important to work in partnership, because otherwise, you know, there's this much control that you can give to a partner. Ultimately, you need to make sure that you're part of that decision making. That would be the second one. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe the third one would be what I said, right? You know, kind of like the panic override. You have everything ready, you get to an agreement and so on, and then the moment that there's a market change, everything becomes a manual override, and you panic for about 3 months, and then you have to kind of like, you know, start from the beginning. But what I would say is, you know, if you're willing to give this a go, you know, give it your true self, invest in learning the tool, invest in equipping your team about the tool, and then reap the benefits.
Wonderful. And I guess as well, you can't just, you know, start working with a revenue management tool for like a couple of months, right? You need at least like a year to see the results, right? Let me get someone here.
Hi, I'll try to organize my ideas because it's kind of tricky, my question. Owners sometimes have expectations. ODAs have their commission. So, for example, for Booking.com, you've got Genius, 10% less. You've got their commission, 15% less. You have an empty property that suddenly you want to say, okay, I want you to have more vision on this property, so increase the ODA commission for that property. So, do you recommend to have, what are your thoughts on having a strategy and increase? Avantio gives you the chance to increase, for example, 10%, 15% for Booking, Airbnb. Do you recommend that, taking into account what I said before, like Genius and all those stuff? Because sometimes we do have strategies and revenue management strategies, but then the owners don't understand, okay, there is a commission from platforms, and if you want to have more visibility, there is Genius. I don't know if you get the idea. Do you recommend increasing, not increasing? How do you, through, for example, Beyond, manage that, taking into account the platform commission and all those discounts? If you take, for example, a last minute discount, then, okay, and then Genius, and then Booking, and then IRPF, so for owners. So I don't know if I explain myself.
Yeah, no, it's getting fun, isn't it? Yeah, to try to determine the price. We work obviously very closely with Avantio, and we understand kind of like, you know, what they can layer on top. So normally when we optimize for a price, we optimize for the kind of like end price for the user, and we can take those things into consideration, because that's ultimately what people will press play on when they make a booking. But you raise the topic of the owners, right? It's becoming more, you know, harder and harder to let them know that this is actually the amount that they're going to get, but you do need to put these markups,
because
right?
They have access. For example, most of our owners, they can see. But then they ask, okay, but if you have this price in Avantio, why, when I get into Airbnb, it's higher? Why? And then you start, it's very difficult, because for us also, for example, in Airbnb, we have our logo. So for us, it's interesting to increase prices a little bit in ODAs, because if a guest is smart enough, he will look into our website and it will always be more competitive. But it's extremely tricky with our owners to get to understand that and to know the right path, you know, because if we increase, then it's many things to take into consideration.
No, it is a lot, yeah. And that's what we highlighted, like owner communication and educating them on, you know, essentially, you know, from $1 that a user pays you, you know, how much goes to different places and how much is true, you know, revenue outside of your own commission, is definitely an art. But I don't have a good answer for anything that, you know, provide them with, you know, extremely clear strategy, right? You know, why are you doing that? Why do you need to add an extra 15% if something is going through Airbnb? Well, because, it saves you a ton of money on Google Ads, right? Like, there's lots of different reasons why being on OTAs is a good idea, why, having your own direct website is a good idea. And you just need to be able to explain to the owners, how you attract users, how you optimize your pricing, and all of those things. But believe me, creating presentations for owners is also a big part of what even our CX team needs to do, because explaining owners how these technologies has advanced and how you need all of these different tools to be able to attract that demand, because there's a lot more supply as well to compete against the properties. It's hard. So I don't have a magic bullet for you beyond, try to keep it simple, maybe kind of like, phases of what a user goes through, and keep trying, because sometimes you need to repeat three things.
Do take this into consideration, all of these things. Well, maybe I should talk to you after this.
Yeah, no, we can definitely chat online, and I can show you, some of the decks that we have as well, just to talk more about dynamic pricing rather than OTAs. But it is not obvious. And some owners take the leap, and some others, they don't. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think there's a question.
We have another question here. Mary, 1 second.
My question is a bit about market trends, kind of. So yesterday we had this great booking for next summer for an apartment. It was really good booking. And my colleague, he was very happy, like, well, see, this apartment normally people doesn't book with that many advance and everything. And he was very happy, but at that moment, I don't know why, I asked myself, like, well, right now with this situation, with the war and the prices of food, commodities, everything going up and up, what right now seems to be a good price, maybe when June or July comes, I don't see that price such a good price, because all the costs have also increased. And maybe the cleaning fee will be higher and everything will be higher. So is it better with this crazy market and this crazy environment right now to maybe focus on the short term and leave the long term a bit, I don't know, like increase a lot the prices and then adjust in the short term? I don't know. I think you get like the key of the question.
Yeah, and I don't think I can, I can tell you what to do, because ultimately it's your business. But yeah, so maybe a couple of things I can mention, right? Definitely last year, booking times were super short. We've seen them lengthen a little bit. So one, the pandemic is sort of, almost over. So people have gone back into planning holidays a little bit more, which I think is good, because again, managing revenue when people are booking kind of like, with 3 days in, it's very hard. It's extremely hard. So I think that's positive in general for kind of like, the industry to calm down for a bit. Now, having said that, a booking for next summer, there's a few. We do, if it's a really good value, you can probably hedge, right? If it's a decent amount of money, like, okay, at least you have that, and then you'll see, how things go. But in general, even though the booking times have become a bit longer from where they were maybe even 6 months ago, they're still quite short. So that's an indication that probably if something hasn't been booked, not panic, but also things that have not been booked will most likely get booked. Yeah. So I don't know if that helps you. Somewhere in between. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful, Maria. Thank you so much for all the tips.